A pleasure to meet all at last. And once again, it's about that time where in fact I come around to give my first impressions of a certain new video game that had come out recently. Now, first of all, it's not November 1st, just as I would have normally had things scheduled. Every 1st and 15th of each month, at least since when I've started, which was on September 1st, mind you that, or the 2nd, since it turns out the uploading took a bit longer than I would have hoped for and ended up going just after midnight of October 2nd and September 2nd. So basically speaking, I'm not entirely following through on what the scheduling system is like, but mind you that, it's a bit of a difficult process. Because first I gotta get the games, then play through a few hours of them, then have them exported because PS5 game files just don't seem to work correctly with my current editing software. And despite some upgrades, file compatibility still is not the prime prospect of my editing software as it stands today. So I do thankfully have ways to convert the files into compatible formats. So be that they work nonetheless is impressive. But of course, I probably will never truly follow through with the likes of the scheduling system for first impressions. So I can at least agree that maybe twice a month, regardless of whether it's the 1st or 15th or the 10th or the 20th, could probably be applicable, just as long as I continue to put through 2 episodes a month. I could always put it down to 1 episode a month if necessary. So, like I've said, since today is October 7th, not the 1st, and October 7th and the 1st, it's actually November 7th and the 1st. So, rather than it being November 1st, just as I would have normally done so, it's the 7th right now. And of course, it's also because of the game in particular that I got, which unfortunately is not Black Ops 6. So, yeah, much like Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, there were people all over claiming their own copy of the pre-order for Black Ops 6 this year. So, I don't quite see it happening right now, but I'm sure one of these days I will eventually get to it and talk about it as much as I can. So, hopefully that'll go down well. Until then though, I thankfully have a substitution. Life is Strange Double Exposure. So, the latest installment in Square Enix's Life is Strange series. A certain series that captivates about a certain gifted person whom is able to, in fact, solve a certain conspiracy, whether it be a murder or a robbery or the conspiracy that basically carries over through at least 8 hours of gameplay. And that's something that Square Enix has been able to keep alive for so long, even going so long as to create a spiritual successor known as True Colors, which came out in 2021. But here in 2024, Double Exposure basically reutilizes the old lore that was established in the older Life is Strange games, especially given the person in question whom is the titular role. Her life is strange, but she is feeling double exposed. Max Caulfield, which of course is short for Maxine Caulfield, is basically a former resident of the state of Oregon whom had now moved down to Caledon University. She basically has established connections with some new friends, especially after the grueling events that had gone down back in her hometown years ago. And so, now having fully grown and entering her life as a college student, one would guess what else could possibly happen to her. In the older Life is Strange games, from what I at least currently understand, Max Caulfield is in fact one of those gifted children. Yeah. If other such games of any known franchise like Beyond Two Souls or even the likes of certain Final Fantasy games have taught us anything, is that some people happen to have a certain perspective, void, and timeline-based power system. In the case of Max Caulfield, it's insane. At least in this particular instance, I'm surely seeing something beyond most games that could just simply give us a unique perspective of what it's like to go on down on different paths and choose whatever actions to make, with each one varying in consequence In fact, the Life is Strange series does in fact give us that exact perspective, even with this game. In terms of the story that I've seen so far, you have Max Caulfield herself, as well as her friend, known by the name of Safi. She is in fact the daughter of an administrator at Caledon University, and is somewhat eccentric, but she still is in fact a good face to get along with. She and Max do in fact venture into an old bowling alley that was once abandoned over a decade ago. At least according to her, she does state that the bowling alley was abandoned a decade ago and had been around since the 1960s. So basically, it's a bit of an impression that Max believes that the place was much older than that, especially upon being as deserted as it currently stands. But after poking through some areas, they eventually find some nice snapshots of which that Max can use to her advantage and create a unique project. In fact, once we get to the next scene of the game, which takes place at a bar known as the Turtle, this is where things do kick up quite a bit. In fact, there's a certain relationship that Max is hoping to form with the bartender known as Amanda. And the thing is that Max has to engage with her by getting her name placed on a nearby chalkboard showcasing the worst pickup lines in a date. And well, she does get some insight from some folks that are inside the Turtle itself, including a few other faces there. But in terms of the choices that I had to select in terms of which pickup line I should put up on the board, or at least have Amanda to put up on the board, it's Safi's, which was campfire oriented. And basically, it's impressive. I wouldn't say that it was a bad pickup line. I mean, there's just a lot of pun-tastic things about it, you know. But, you know, apart from all that, I did get the pickup line put on the board, which was a good thing. And by the end of the chapter, you know what happened then? Well, there's percentages relating to what actions I picked and what choices I've made so far in the game. Thankfully, a majority of them were actually based off of the overall majority of what other players would have picked, as in the majority based on percentage. Anything that's like 70% of the actuality or 50% of the actuality, a lot of my choices did fall within the majority of the percentages. So I feel like that could be a good thing, but then again, Life is Strange is known for basically fooling some people into thinking that these choices are actually meant to be good when they could be the exact opposite. Anyways though, it isn't long before we get onto the rooftops, in which we not only have Max and Safi, but also another friend named Moses. And so the three basically stargaze for some time using telescopes and computers, before eventually there is a so-called bottle cap game going on, and Moses challenges Max to try and give Safi the bottle cap without actually giving her the bottle cap. And in terms of the choices that were available, you could hide the bottle cap in a snowball and throw it at her face. You could hide it in her box of her favorite candies known as Sour Cats, which kind of reminds me of Sour Patch Kids. I don't know if Square Enix got the rights for it or whatnot, but whatever. And there was also her official computer bag. And I do know that there were some other options, but I went with the snowball one. Even though there was a very low probability of me actually succeeding, I went with it anyways. Because let's face it, on our first playthrough, we have no idea how to put this stuff together. Of course, I threw it at her, missed, and the bottle cap basically just went off the building to the ground. So, no bottle cap for me tonight. But it doesn't even matter, because Safi does get a little phone call that she ends up leaving the rooftop and going on a little walk along the trail, with Max and Moses eventually following up behind her. And well, believe it or not, when Max does begin her stroll home to get some sleep for the night, there are some disturbances in her mind that cause her to basically fall to the ground. And little does she realize that, well, her powers are officially coming back. After all this time since those travesties in Oregon happened, who would have thought they'd follow her to her new home in Caledon? But anyways, she eventually works up the need to go and try to find Safi to make sure she's okay, especially after snapshotting an owl on top of a statue. But believe it or not, when she does get up there, meets up with Safi, who's sitting on a bench, her body just falls to the ground. A wound is on her chest, meaning someone murdered her. Yep. It's that classic old case. A whodunit, if you will. But really though, in this instance, they actually not only managed to really hit me in the heart, it almost makes you feel like, what did you do wrong in that instance? What choice could have possibly caused you to just have Safi wander off on her own and then boom, get gunshotted in the chest? At night, on a park bench, in the overlook. Well, nothing could be done at that point. Her death was simply made as a murder. And while police investigations were going on, lots of mournings and memoriams were being put all over the place, including internet timelines. Yeah. And so, apart with all the snapshots that you get, all the collectibles that you can find, and all of the unique locations and points of interest that you find as well, and not to mention hundreds of different other things that you can look at. Statues, sculptures, papers referring to things like flyers or advertisements or whatnot. There's just tons of things to look at and tons of dialogue that you can hear in. But I ultimately wouldn't recommend doing everything out there. But the idea of simply looking at everything out there is a bit tempting, even to myself. Anyways though, when all does go down, Safi's death thankfully isn't seen as a laughing matter or otherwise. The Caledon students do feel grief and a little bit of sympathy towards her at least. However, with Max, it's a different story, because she ends up just blacking out and just trying to block off the world for a while, before eventually Amanda comes over and gives her some food. A nice casserole dish as well as a big salad. Thankfully are enough to convince Max that she needs to get back out into the world and clean up her act. It wasn't her fault, after all, that Safi just got shot by someone at night. But eventually, when she does pull herself together, things only continue to get stranger from there. And it's around this point where I basically would end the whole thing. And so, basically speaking, the game itself is truly a strange piece with an interesting story, some unique things to look at, some nice lore to learn about, and tons of other fun stuff that you can put together. So it's that old Life is Strange treatment that we give from Square Enix in the same regard as how we do with other adventure games and things that focus on the likes of sci-fi, suspense, thrillers, and etc. But with the addition of crime and mystery, it seems that with the more Life is Strange entries that we get, the more things could possibly take place. And the thing is that considering all the different things that we have gotten to learn about when it comes to Max Caulfield, as well as other characters established within the franchise, it does only make sense that we do get more of this stuff. This is the kind of concept that still does feel a bit fresh, because I at least understand why the subtitle is known as Double Exposure. I almost felt like that it was some crappy remake of the original games that were put together years ago, but boy, it's actually original. And the fact is that it's a reboot sequel of the other games that we've gotten in the past. It goes to show that Square Enix really is looking forward to making sure that we still get some big pieces in this franchise. And I wouldn't go so far to say that unlike with other things we've seen in the past, like Final Fantasy or Just Cause, or even the newer Tomb Raider games, the possibilities probably won't come to an end at any point in time. The thing is though, Double Exposure is more than just the name, referring to photography and stuff, because that is a skill set that Max has in the franchise. But what I understand is that Double Exposure actually does refer to a certain phenomenon that goes on within the game's story, especially when you go later on, and eventually find out that Safi is actually alive, but not in the way you'd imagine. It's not like she's a ghost or anything, or something that's trying to warn Max about the future or whatnot. No, there's actually another phenomenon taking place within the actual timeline. Yes, and timeline's a good keyword to use here. Turns out that when Max got her powers back, after a little brush went down, doing some investigations on what happened that night, the many leads that she would discover, it turns out it was a whole nother thing going on in a whole different reality that she didn't even expect to see. Yep. She apparently can drift between two different universes, two different timelines, two different worlds with the same exact things in mind. I mean, in one case you got Safi who gets murdered, but in the other world, what happens? There's a whole different thing going on. Safi's alive, but her car takes a big beating. And there was supposedly a conspiracy that somebody had actually used a skull from the turtle bar to destroy the windshield. And well, the whole thing, like I said, just keeps getting stranger and stranger. The story is a bit confusing for what it is, but being that I've only played through about 3.5 hours worth of the game, it does only make sense that obviously I won't understand it immediately, nor will I understand until I go as far as I possibly can until I hit the end or something else. But the thing is that I barely have Chapter 2 completed. And considering the choices I made with Chapter 1, I'm not quite sure if I've made the majority of good choices with Chapter 2, or maybe the percentages are playing me for a fool. The majority could have been the wrong choice. Like I said, it's a bit of a mystery alone to find out which is the best possible path to take with the best possible choices one can make. This is certainly going to be a game with lots of different timelines and lots of different paths worth taking. In the same way that we have had other games like anything that was made by Square Enix, apart from Life is Strange, or even with the likes of certain Quantic Dream franchises like Detroit Become Human and Heavy Rain. Though, who could also forget one that really stood out at the time? Until Dawn. Of course, Until Dawn, believe it or not, did get itself a bit of a graphical enhancement not too long ago, so it does make sense that this kind of game genre is still alive and kicking it pretty well. And because we have a new Life is Strange installment, a game that is known to really up the level of paths and choices in life that are worth taking or not, it only makes sense that we have this sort of thing going on for as much as possible. And I sure do hope that another original series comes by and really hammers it with the choices and the storylines, because lots of people are really going to fall in love with these. And I know I do like where most of them are going. I mean, I played Detroit Become Human alone 6 different times in the past 7 years. Almost. So like I said, it sure is impressive, with all things considered. And with Life is Strange Double Exposure, in comparison to some of the others, I wouldn't say that it's a great way to piece things together with the Life is Strange series, but at least with the thought of continuing the life of Max Caulfield, especially knowing that she's fully grown now and trying to work out her own personal issues while still tackling everyday threats and etc. With all the stuff that I've learned about, all the characters I've gotten to meet up with, and all of the dialogue that I've possibly had to hear that really fills me in with knowledge, wisdom, and etc., I'll just go on ahead and give this game a nice big beneficiary in the form of a scoring from us KFN members at a good 8.8 out of 10.1. So obviously I have yet to finish Double Exposure, but when I do hope it'll be fantastic. So here's to hoping I find out who the murderer is of Safi, and here's to also finding out what is going on in this second timeline that, well, We just happen to be exploring it at the same time. So, of course, while it is November 7th, 2024, I will have plans to get another game to finish off this month's worth of first impressions. And with December, January, February, March, and whatnot, I will certainly continue this going for a long time. And so, if you want to see more, go down to my channel. Make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side.